Uh, Hello, welcome to our Enron presentation. It includes myself, Caden, Denzel, Luke, and Sebastian. Next slide. So who is Enron? Enron was a large energy and oil company run by Kenneth Lay and Jeff Skilling, who was the CEO when the crash came, along with Andy Fastow, who was the CFO and the main man behind the SPE issue of Enron. Next slide. So what is market-to-market accounting? The definition from Investopedia says a method measuring the fair value of accounts that can fluctuate over time, such as assets and liabilities. Mark-to-market's method aims to provide a realistic appraisal of a company's current financial situation based on the current market. Mark-to-market wasn't all so bad besides the case of Enron. It allowed companies to show more figurative values of assets based on the market value, which is relevant to investors. However, when the market is unstable, MTM accounting will not accurately represent the asset's value. With mark-to-market accounting, companies can also boost their profit projections. Mark-to-market allowed Enron to cook the books, which is what the method is known for in Enron's case, as actual cash flows from assets were way less than reported under the market-to-market accounting. So in an attempt to hide this, Enron set up the SPEs, the shell corporations better known as, to hide the losses. These shell corporations were impossible to link to Enron as they were only companies on paper and had no real operations. So what did Enron do to manipulate revenue? Firstly, Enron had a deal with Blockbuster and they recognized all the revenue at one time. Market-to-market allowed this and propped up the company's revenue. We view revenue as once the service or good is delivered or performed, the revenue is then recognized. However, that is where market-to-market accounting was helpful to Enron's scam. Revenue was booked the day after the whole estimated value of the contract was put on the books. Enron did this to Scythe Energies in 1992. Enron agreed to a contract to supply gas for 20 years to a new plant. However, Enron's book showed that the contract of $3.5 billion value was being shown as revenue and recording a profit the day after on a project that had not been started. So cash and revenue had no correlation in Enron's case. Next slide.
The absence of criteria in the way revenue was recorded in the mark-to-market accounting case for Enron was what had them in trouble. In most accounting methods, revenue is recognized from a sales contract when the goods are delivered. However, this wasn't the case for Enron in their mark-to-market accounting method. Mark-to-market accounting books the entire estimated revenues at the time of the deal, and in this case made it look very peculiar to analysts that were looking at Enron. We have learned that there are certain criteria for recognizing revenue in contracts. We have learned that there are special situations when some of those criteria are not met as well. While the mark-to-market method allowed Enron to realize these revenues, it had them in trouble. Enron failed to meet one of the criterion that we studied in accrual accounting. In their case, realizing revenue before transferring any ownership of any goods, as there had been nothing done yet, was a real big red flag. This was a failure, as in one case, Enron would go to be bankrupt 9 years later after never having completed a contract that was for 20 years, banking too much even before it had been earned. Next slide.
So why did Enron do this and what was the incentive? All assets were increased in value and therefore they can mark the fair value difference of book value as revenue. In doing so, this will create a false picture of what is really going on in the company. Thus, Enron will be able to sway investors to follow the narrative that the chief officers want them to believe. Revenue will be inflated and show growth that is not even necessarily there. This essentially will mislead the stakeholders as well as the investors, as there will be information that is not accurate. Debt to equity will look good as retained earnings will be much higher from profits being realized by asset market price. They also would record future revenue in the present, which will improve debt to equity. Summed up, all of these things were done to make the company look better to the public to boost purchases from investors. As well as high-level management got a high percentage of stock options, as well as this would increase their incentive to do this in the first place. This was another form of incentivization for upper level management by giving them bonuses. Overall, the stock was a no-brainer as it was very appealing to investors who were looking to purchase companies from this sector. Since Enron was able to cook the books and show their growth as more substantial than any other competitors, they were most likely able to outperform competition in the stock market.
All right, next slide, please. So Enrod's fraud and the view of Christianity. Oh, could you go to next slide?
I think it's already showing on here.
Oh, is it already showing?
Yeah.
Okay, but so from a Christian standpoint, there were a couple of verses from the Bible that really stood out. Enron manipulated his profits, and by doing that, he greatly manipulated a lot of people willing to invest into his company. So Leviticus 25:17 stands out in terms of manipulation. So do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am the Lord your God. And then also Leviticus 19:11. Enron deceived a lot of people with his market-to-market accounting and was constantly lying about his numbers in the books. And Leviticus 19:11 best displays that. So do not steal, do not lie, and do not deceive one another. So after looking at it from a Christian standpoint as well, you can really see that there is a lot of deceit going on over here. And like in the stock, that one really surprised me a lot.